Following Gamergate in any capacity is an exercise in psychosis. So many of my more academically inclined friends and colleagues don't want to weigh in on the subject at all. I don't think that's necessarily a really good idea, and I don't understand what all the fear is. I find the points made with this whole Gamergate thing, I'm kind of optimistic about it. This is what happens with a mature medium. You have really big debates. You have people who get so inflamed in their passions that horrific mistakes are made. On the internet, trolls will be trolls. For me, what is good about this is the fact that there's now a clash between people who cherish and love gaming as a juvenile, relentlessly violent, impulsive, offensive, guilty pleasure. And I'm right there with you. I mean, I picked up Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 today and spent time on there. And just, I don't know, there's something about the simplicity. There's something about that. I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. There's something about the raw, stupid male aggression of it that oddly seems validating for me. But I also love to open up Kill Screen and read the latest very high-minded academic assessment of gender roles in games. It's not that I look at that stuff from an activist perspective, though. It's something that piques my interest. As an academic, I can evaluate something and I can assess it without condemning it. Like, I mean, when it comes to the depiction of female characters in video games, sure, it's ridiculous. The way that they're clothed, the way their armor is depicted. Good Lord, Prince of Persia. But I think anybody who's going to take that stuff seriously has serious mental problems. And by the way, when you see women depicted in such a fashion, when you see women basically being objectified so fully, that is providing a comment on our society. These games show us, give us a window into the mind of the creator and the player. And the popularity of it, it's almost like a temperature gauge for how people see women and how people consume the image of women. These depictions are doing you a favor because they're bringing it to you in an easily accessible way, making the whole conversation of feminism and gender bias more accessible for people who may otherwise never have that conversation. And I'm sure most of the gamers that I know aren't ready for that conversation yet. The games still have a very different, role for them in their intellectual life. Luckily, I can kind of sympathize with that. But condemnation is not useful. Condemnation and trying to purposefully restructure the gaming world to fulfill an ideal of how gender identities are supposed to kind of like mash together, how they're supposed to work together, you're going to have a bad time. Because nobody, A, you're going to have trouble selling that because of the way the market is, and B, you're going to look like an outsider manipulating the system. What makes the conversation work so much better is when feminists and academic thinkers come up with games that show the depth of the human experience. It's not enough to simply criticize and shoot down what's being made in the marketplace. You have to offer an alternative that scratches a different intellectual itch. That's the only way that you can even remotely change anything. And you can't expect to change it. I mean, when you compare games to another artistic medium like film or music, you still have different strata of people who consume those types of things, and you have different purposes for consumption. Someone can go and see a pornographic film and still enjoy something that challenges their perspective on social issues. Those two things are not like mutually exclusive to each other. And the conversation about gender identity is still a fascinating one. A lot of the feminists that I've seen on the internet, and there's some pretty fiery ones out there, I have a lot of loyalty to feminism, but I think that there's a way that you can package the message that is not so much of an attack. The men's rights movement, for me, is not about reclaiming some type of patriarchal superiority. Men's rights, men's issues, from a gender biases perspective, is fascinating. Because the role that men have played in society has been a complex one. And it's come with its own unique traumas and psychoses. We have our own hang-ups that we as men feel very boxed in certain ways. I'm not saying that, it's the same plight that women had before the real feminist movement took place and changed and, instituted a lot of social revolutions. And thank God feminism did that. But what feminism truly introduced was a conversation where we began to actually evaluate, categorize, and analyze our roles as different genders. That's, in a lot of ways, that's even better than how they physically changed society. Understanding and being able to, evaluate your behavior in a more objective fashion where you see your biases, that's kind of the name of the game, isn't it? And me being a man who has struggled with mental health issues in the past, specifically mental health issues associated with my professional role, my role as a breadwinner, and the way that society puts me as the man, expecting me to be a leader in my household, when my wife is so much smarter than me. That's difficult. And we're never going to come to an understanding of the types of stresses and plights that men confront. We're never going to be able to put those things in their place. We're never going to be able to deal with them and understand our interaction with women in a healthy way unless we look at the really weird psychological traumas that men suffer as well. And, as I'm doing this, as I respond to the feminists involved in Gamergate, as I respond to the feminists really all over YouTube, where I see the reiteration of the patriarchal movement, where I see, that constant accusation of misogyny and all this stuff. I hear you. And I think it's important to understand that there's still so much latent misogyny, and it's there because we don't see it for what it is, and we don't, really, really pick it apart. In this way, feminism and, and like men's issues, I don't want to say men's rights because that sounds just a little too in your face. Although, the categorization of it as men's rights is also very, very, very convincing, especially when you look at like family issues, you look at family court and all that stuff. We don't have to be enemies in this fight because feminism laid the groundwork for any masculinity studies. It comes from feminism because they were the ones who first started looking at the way that society reinforces gender stereotypes. So, trolls will be trolls, but the conversation that we're having around Gamergate right now is exceedingly helpful. There's so many cool things that games can do to make rhetorical points that doesn't necessarily have to destroy the juvenile foundation from which gamers like me sprung out. So, it's a logical fallacy to appeal to the middle ground. But I'm optimistic in this sense that these are the growing pains of a medium that is coming into its own, that is ready to be art, is ready for social commentary. And we never have to leave the crazies behind. They always have a place.